I'm going to spend the next sort of half an hour or so just building on what you said there and giving some examples, because when we talked about how today would run, it's really about trying to explain what we've done, what we do and what we've done, but also trying to exemplify some of that and give some tips as well. We are by far a perfect organization. We are silver, aiming for gold, but we feel as though we're someone who's striving to be a much better place, no, a really good place to work. We're a really good place to work. We're going to be a great place to work. And we are hopefully in the next sort of half an hour, I'll show you how that's, or how we're doing that. So I'm going to share my screen. And hopefully you can see that. And I'm going to minimize people. So the title we're working to today is Our Investors in People Story. And it's really down to our approach, our successes, and also our opportunities. And you've had the introduction from Marie. So I'm going to talk about who Pearson are, our Investors in People story so far, our approach to employee engagement, our successes, our opportunities. And I think it's worth also looking at, how we've weathered the storms of 2020, and we're still dealing with those now and how we're coming through. There is a chance for a Q&A. We talked about whether we do that during or after. We think probably after I've done my presentation, we'll take the questions then. And then, as Marie said, if there's time and if there's the willingness to do it, some breakout discussions as well. A bit about me. So as Marie said, I've got a very interesting job title. And when I took this role on 3 years ago, I've been at Pearson 23 years and I've always been part of the business. So I run teams that produce question papers for examinations, so for A-levels, GCSEs and BTECs. But 3 years ago, I took on the role in a more people-focused role here. And it felt to me as though it was something that we wanted to exemplify and show to the company that we were serious about our people. And what better way of doing that than putting in exactly what we're about, investing in our people. So that's my job title. I know Paul Devoy likes seeing that whenever it pops up. 23 years at Pearson, a variety of roles, and the big part of my job and what I'll show you during the presentation is the network of people that support me and the business, because obviously for a company that's global as we are and got 2,000 employees in scope in the UK, I can't do it on my own. So I've got a team of 80 champions who are volunteers who do a day job as well on top of that, who work with me to make us a better place to work. And as Marie said, we got silver accreditation back in April 2018, and we are in the process now of going for gold in starting in January with our survey in January 2021. And just added to this, I'm also a qualified business coach. And I think the really important thing on here is also one of our mental health first aiders. And I've been a mental health first aider for the last 3 years. And that's a key thing I'm going to talk about why I think we've weathered the storms this year reasonably well, is because we've had things embedded rather than had to do things reactively. And the outcomes for today, we thought it would be really good, hopefully, for you to hear about our approach, because I know how I feel is that I go to a number of these events and it's really good to hear what other companies are doing because you can learn from everybody else. How we've embedded the framework so it's become part of our business, and we've had invested in people for a number of years now. Why we choose to go down this route and how it's helped us again in 2020, in the year that it's been. So first things first, many of you may know who Pearson are, but many of you probably don't. And we've got a new CEO who started a month ago, and his big push is to look at Pearson and make Pearson a recognized brand, a recognized name globally, because currently we're probably known more by our products than we are, and product brands, than we are by the brand itself. So who are Pearson? Well, first things first, really, this is who Pearson are. And this isn't a random group of people I'm putting up on the screen here. These are the champions that work with me across the UK. So these are 80 faces, people who give up their time to make Pearson a better place to work and carry out that really vital function of telling me what's working and not working where they work, but also feeding back and working with their heads of department and directors and senior vice presidents to tell them what they could be doing more of. It's a really great network of people that we work together so closely that there are really very rarely surprises about what we're doing around employee engagement, and that really helps me, but it also helps the business. Pearson UK is also, I suppose, yeah, as I said before, known by our brand. So the ones at the top are ones hopefully most of you know. So EdXL, BTEC, and then some more here that are more product led, and things you may have come into contact with over this year. So something like the Maths Factor with Carol Vorderman, something that had reasonable uptake as a product. In the summer, just ballooned and exponential growth this year as parents try to teach their children at home while schools were shut. And on the bottom here, we've got, I suppose, the future of Pearson, where we're moving from being a publisher and being an exam board more to being something where we interact with schools, colleges, employers, but also parents and students. So working with Liverpool FC in our BTEC area and esports, to doing a lot around in the apprenticeship space, and then also launching things like working with Harrow School to launch an online school, and Escape Studios, where we're doing visual effects and for films and production companies. So that's Pearson in its brands. And I suppose here, this is Pearson's mission, to help people make progress in their lives through learning. And when Marie said about Pearson and about when Richard comes in and sees us, the one thing he picks up on is people are there for the right reasons and they care about what they do. It's very true. It's really easy for me to talk about people at Pearson because we come to work every day to try and make the world a better place and to give every learner the best opportunity to progress. And 99.9% of people you meet from Pearson have that, whether they're brand new starters or like me, been there 23 years. And that's really so in that sense, it's a great place to work, and it's really great to work with Richard when he comes in, because I know for guaranteed those conversations will be positive in that space. The downside of that, of course, is that if you've got people who are so committed to the values and the beliefs of the company, is if we don't live up to those, they're our biggest critics. But actually, that's not the worst thing in the world. So the images on the screen here will just tell you that we have 22,000 employees around the world, and we're in 70 countries. Now, in the UK, there's about 4,000. But they don't all report into the UK, if that makes sense. They have reporting lines outside the UK. So my scope and the people that I look after and our accreditation in Pearson UK is the 2,000 people who live and work in the UK and whose reporting lines are in the UK. We also include in that our 25,000 associates. And these are people who write, mark, and assess our question papers and our assessments for EdXL and BTEC. In the middle there, you've got our head office, which is at the Strand, and anybody who came to a talk I did a couple of years ago would have been upstairs in the Strand in a lovely suite on the 10th floor. Currently, it's a building site. It is being totally stripped out and refurbished. That was planned before COVID, and now it's been accelerated. But that's our home office. But on the bottom, you've got 5 more of our offices, really, and 5 more places that we work at, because Pearson isn't just a publisher or an exam board. So bottom left, there's a scanning area where all of the exam scripts go to in Yorkshire. The next one next to that is a classroom. So we work with the Ministry of Defence, running training and education and learning for junior soldiers in Harrogate. In the middle, we've got our contact centre in Manchester, where we take all the phone calls from our teachers and from our associates. Next to that, we've got Pearson College London, which is our very own standalone university where we offer qualifications and Pearson qualifications. And on the right-hand side, this one sort of covers a couple of offices in Harlow and Oxford, where we do a lot of our publishing business has been historically. So that's our offices. The gentleman on the right-hand side there is Andy Bird, who is our new Chief Executive Officer, and in post, just about a month now. Used to be number 2 at Disney, and is coming to Pearson with a very different view about what we can do and what we can achieve. And it's no lie to say that the energy he's brought to the business in that month has been a tonic to a lot of people who have gone through a very, very tough year. A tonic to employees, but also, as he pointed out on a webinar yesterday to all the UK staff, he's also added £1 billion worth of value to the company. The share price has popped up. So on the left-hand side, we are a FTSE 100 company, and it's been a bumper year, as you can see from that graph there. But the it's looking healthier than it was, and the way he's talking is encouraging employees that we have a clear direction of travel and a path where we're heading, and that's really important when in these times of change. So that's Pearson. And now I'll just run through quickly our story of investing in people. So this is a little grid here. So the plaque, which some of you will probably recognise, is the first plaque we had, and it's outside our offices in High Holborn, where Edexcel used to be based, which is the part of the business I sort of come from. And that was back in 2004. So we started our journey in 2001-2. We started looking into investing in people as something we could work with to improve us as a business. And since that time there, obviously Edexcel then became part of Pearson, and we started bringing parts of the business together, because what we realized was there's no point having one part of Pearson being accredited or being a silver business with investors in people if the rest of it isn't covered or is at a lower standard. So over time, over the last few years, we've built a Pearson UK story. So that, yes, we achieved silver back in 2018, and that gold is what we're looking for in 2021. Now, I'll talk to Richard, our practitioner, and also to Marie and Talika about what happens after that. But the view would be that we make something a bit more UK focused once we achieve gold, and we look at how we can bring more of our UK business into that area, and potentially more of our global business. But it really is trying to think about what's the best thing for Pearson and our employees. In terms of scopes, I've mentioned before what's in scopes. There's about 1,800 on here now. We're about 2,000 employees based in the UK, and all of our associates. We've got 80 champions, and on the right-hand side, we've got our 10 sites across the UK, and they vary from big offices with 1,000 people in them to smaller offices where you've got a handful of people, like 5 to 10 people working from it. So we aren't one business, we aren't one type of business. We are lots of different businesses that we that work slightly differently, but come together under one banner and one set of values and behaviours. This is our wheel. So this is what we achieved back in 2018. And so you can see from that we achieved everything in terms of becoming a sort of silver business. So we've got everything established. And in terms of advanced areas, in terms of our values and empowering people, continuous improvement and sustainability, we were seen as being a business that is showing real evidence of being an advanced business, and therefore not too far off being a gold business. The challenge has been over the last 2 and a bit years is looking at this and how do we improve those areas that aren't up to that standard and maintain what we've got already. And I think that's some of the things I've certainly picked up when talking to other businesses. Is it's just as hard to maintain as it is to improve. And with continuous improvement as something that we all strive for, that idea that even standing still isn't the worst outcome. And certainly in January through to our assessment, if it turns out that we maintain silver at the end of that, while that disappoints me personally, because I do feel as though we've made progress, I still wouldn't see that as the worst outcome, because silver still says to me we're a really good place to work. Now, this next slide sort of pares it down a bit, and this is supposed to be the first learning point for anybody listening and watching now. And certainly the big thing that I've learned in my 3 years doing this, or 3 or 4 years now even doing this, is being close to investors in people and your practitioner. There is obviously a cost attached to working closely and calling in your practitioner to do more work with you, but the cost is outweighed so much by the benefit you get from it, certainly for us in Pearson. So earlier this month, only 2 weeks ago, we had Richard come in for 3 days. I was supposed to do a pre-assessment visit. So the idea was to come in virtually and speak to as many people as possible. Now, historically, Richard's done this and he's come and visited our site. So we've done days up in Yorkshire and Manchester, and then down to Oxford and Harlow, where he's gone into meetings, had one-to-one interviews with people and met senior leaders. He couldn't do it this time, but actually, a bit like today, it's actually more inclusive, and it feels like it's been much more inclusive, that he's actually been able to speak to more people in a way that feels as interactive as it would be face-to-face. So Richard came in and did 14 30-minute interviews of one-to-ones. He also met with our employee resource groups, which I'll speak about in a minute, and met with our HR and communications teams. He also met with our apprenticeships teams because we're looking at what we can do around investors in apprenticeships and whether we go for that standard early next year and maybe even attach it to this assessment we're going for. He met with our associate management team, the people who look after our 25,000 associates, and he met with the champions. So I thought it was really important that he met with the people who I work with really closely. And as well as that, involved in going into team meetings, and they could be standalone team meetings or they could be meetings that are one-offs that were already in the diary. So he met with one of our vice presidents and then went into their people meeting and saw what happened at that meeting. So that's what he's done. And then that then builds into our timeline for next year. So you can see there that I've put in there our context meeting, our survey, our interviews, and then the outcome. And that's really what I'm working towards. And this is a slide that I've presented to our board to give them that heads up about where we are, what's happened recently, and where we're going next. This is a slide that I gave to Richard when he came in. And if anybody's been doing this longer than the recent framework knows that we used to collect reams and reams and folders of evidence. And now it's much more about picking out stories and showing development and showing outcomes. And so what I did with Richard is showed him this roadmap about what it's been like for us over the last sort of 7-8 months. I've got this slide again later on, which I'll go into in more detail. But what it did for me was sort of crystallize what we've achieved this year. What it did for the senior team and the board was the same thing. And for Richard, what it gave him was something to jump off at and talk to people about when he was meeting with them. So he could say things like, Project Metro, I've heard about this. What does it mean to you? So I think there's a real value in having something like this or bullet points about what you've achieved that you can fit onto one page, because it makes it easier for you and reporting, but also for your practitioner. So this is what we got from Richard. We got our report, our interim sort of feedback report for those visits for the 3 days, which again really helped me because I can sort of report back to the board and to our employees and tell them what happened. But having it from Richard, one, makes it succinct, two, makes it in a format that's consistent with our report previously and the report we're going to be getting. And I think the third thing is it's just another bit of evidence to work from. So from this, I then played with it a little bit and popped it into a slide deck. Now, I can't share with you everything that Richard picked up, but what I've got on here really is the outline about what I presented back to our board. So these are the positives. This is what Richard picked up and what had changed in the last sort of 2 years since he came in fully, and really recognizing the work we've done around employee resource groups and our commitment to diversity and inclusion. In the actions, is really picked up on the idea that while we're doing all this work, there's so much work still to be done around that, and we can't stop. These aren't one-off things we do and then think we've achieved that. Thanks very much. So with our employee resource groups, it's really about working closely with them, and I'll touch on them a little bit in a minute. And with around diversity and inclusion, specifically around Black Lives Matter, that feeling that for a global company like ours, we've admitted that we haven't been perfect in the past in terms of how we recruit, develop, and progress people within our organization, and also in our products potentially as well. Because as the world's learning company, we have a big influence nationally and globally about what people learn and are assessed about in schools and colleges and places of work. So looking at what we do there. So the work we're doing around that has crystallized into an action plan led by people internally, but also working with external consultants to make us a better place to work for all of our colleagues. And that's been absolutely key. And so our Investors in People assessment will tie in with the action plan that's come out of that work as well. So that's really, really key for us. The second one down is our response to COVID. And yeah, it goes without saying that what we've managed to do is pivot, like a lot of you have, very, very quickly. But what we've managed to do is pull in majority of things that were in place before we even started. So we had mental health first aiders already in place. We had employee resource groups in place. We had a program where we could move people around the business on waves, which is the next point down. So we could get people to move for 3-month or 6-month placements without going through the HR framework behind that, the rigmarole of big HR processes and red tape, a much more fluid system that meant we could move hundreds of people around the business, not tens of people. And given what we went through this year, so for COVID, for my part of the business, for example, when there aren't any exams being sat in the summer, what do you do with the hundreds of people whose job it is normally to mark and assess and then give grades out for those? There's not much you can do, especially when the ground underneath you is shifting so quickly. So we managed to move those people from those areas into areas where we saw growth and opportunity. So when I mentioned the math factor earlier on, products like that, where we could get people who are talented, who potentially work in an area of the business that isn't normally looked at. So for example, our office in Yorkshire, people there generally didn't apply for jobs that were in Oxford or London because that commute would be too much. In a virtual world, that was taken away. And we have so much evidence of people being empowered to work in new jobs, in new parts of the business, in different countries, in fact. And that has made a huge difference to the company we are today and why we are. I think that's set up for the future of work and this hybrid way of working that's going to emerge in 2021. We really are set for that because of what we've managed to do this year. The next bullet down is around I Manage and I Lead, which are two programs around developing our manager and leadership capabilities, and really focusing on the things that we knew we needed to work on. Like Paul Devoy always says, there are 2 million accidental managers in the UK, people who are promoted because they're good at their job, not managers of people. And recognizing that over the years, we've done a number of things. And this year and next year, focusing much down on the areas we know we need to focus on. So that's been recognized by Richard as well. And finally, communication, an area we knew we needed to improve upon, and our senior leadership team and the managers underneath that have really stepped up. So to give you quotes, there really are things like, I've never been closer to my senior leader than now. And the senior leader saying the same thing. I've never felt as though I know my people better than now. And that's been so valuable in this time of change. But also, we don't unlearn that sort of stuff. I think some of these things are here to stay, and that's a real benefit. In terms of what we got that we need to work on, so our opportunities. So performance conversations, we flipped to moving away from a system where we had annual reviews and a grade was given to people on their performance for the year, to a much more fluid and agile way of having performance conversations. That has been difficult. That came in sort of about 18 months ago. And Richard, when he came in, recognized that would be a challenge for us anyway then. So we put things in place and training in place. And I think it's one of the things that really got disrupted by COVID, in terms of we were having a lot of conversations and a lot more conversations, but I'm not sure people were recognizing those as performance conversations. And so part of my job now, with the feedback Richard's given us, is to go out to our people and say, to remind them that these are taking place, but also to make sure they're using the systems that we've got to track that. And that's the fourth bullet point down. Fusion is our system, which again is a new system that is a bit clunky. So we need to do work on that to make it more usable. And actually people are referring back to it in the days when it was clunky, and it's much better to use now. So my job is a communication job around that. The second bullet point is burnout, which I imagine 99% of people on this call are experiencing in their workplace, if not personally. And that idea that we're all facing challenges in terms of how we work and what's expected of us. And so it's not that we're doing anything wrong here. It's more a fact that it's something which has picked up that we need to make sure we have a laser focus on and make sure we don't forget about it. So we're doing a lot of work around well-being, mental health, first aid. We've got an in-house mindfulness coach that we've had for doing things with us for the last 3 years, that we've sort of upped the amount of work that he's doing with us, but also looking around at things like online Pilates, online Tai Chi, online yoga, delivered by our staff as well. The manager development bullet point is something that I've mentioned already, around do more of that and picking out the areas we know that we're not as strong in. And finally, communication. So what comes with great communication and leadership, really embracing that, is over communication and sort of that, where do I start? Where do I go for the information? So it's really about curating that information in a way that means that managers and employees can access the information they need. We do have a couple of really great methods of doing that. It's really about just making sure people are using that and embedding it. So those are the things that Richard really picked out as things we need to do more of and better. I thought next would be useful to talk about our employee engagement approach, and then bring you in terms of things I've mentioned already and what may work for you. So first things first is having people you trust in the business. Some of these people are HR business partners. The majority of them are normal workers in the workplace who experience day-to-day challenges. They are new employees at our lowest bands through to senior managers like directors who manage teams of 50, 100 people. So we've got the variety of experience there, and they come together to discuss issues in their own teams locally, but also come together to work on problems as a group, as a wider group. And we use the Teams function to really talk almost daily about good practice, but also challenges we face. And it's a really safe space to work in. So they're an absolutely unbelievable network of people. And the line along the top are my lead champions who sort of cover the main areas to look after the main parts of our business. And I really couldn't do my job without them. And they are just fantastic people. That's Christina, Susan, Rahima, Natalie, Emma, and Liz. We've also got our employee resource groups. And when Richard came in 3 years ago, really, we had a couple of them that are up and running strongly. So we had Will, which is our Women in Learning and Leadership group. And we also had Pearson Spectrum, our LGBT plus group. And since then, we've built out. So some of these are based in the US, but Pearson Able, our disability group, and Prime, our group around ethnicity and race, have come on and become real key players in the workplace. And if I say to you, we've got 80 Investors in People champions, we've got over 100 people actively involved as employee resource group members, and that means actively as in running events and being really key parts of the community, embedding best practice, but also calling out poor practice. And added to that, 120 mental health first aiders. You can see that in a company of, I said therefore, 1,800 people that are in scope for our assessment, if 300 plus people are actively engaged in something they care about, we're already well on the way to having a really engaged workforce that's telling us what's going on. And that, for me, is really, really encouraging. You've got to look at the other 85% on how are they involved. But the beauty is we've got so many events going on, whether that's for Black History Month, or as we termed it, Black Excellence Month, or Global Inclusion Week, or Learning at Work Week, whatever it may be. There's a real reach we've got that I think brings so many employees into the family and engages them. Those parts there come into our employee engagement group, which is our focus for employees and our board, our leadership team. And so they all draw together my team's work, and I'm on this group as well, so I have a voice there, the employee resource groups, and any other activities that go on within the business, and they feed up and meet on a quarterly basis with our board. And that means they've got direct access to the president of the UK business, but also the senior vice presidents across the UK. And those are quarterly meetings for an hour and a half that really get to grips with the challenges we face around employee engagement, diversity, inclusion, the strategy of the business, and well-being. And I think that's sometimes forgotten by people outside of Invested in People work, is that this is as much tied to the strategy of the business and the people strategy as it is anything else. And that really is key. And that's where we get our chance. And through that, we then have an input into the strategy of the business. And I'll put this slide up here. Just it's information one really about what our business is and what our strategy is as a business at this point in time, and our values. But it really does guide what we do. All those three groups before are guided by our values and our behaviours and what the strategy is. I'll put a little bit in the bottom here that our strategy and values are under review by our new CEO, and that's something that we'll be hearing more about as a business early next year. But I don't see us moving hugely away from where we stand currently, but maybe nuancing a little bit to look at how we can be a much more consumer-focused company. So I'm going to pop on now to some of our successes, and there'll be a little bit of repeat of what I said earlier, so I will move through these reasonably quickly, but stop at points I think I haven't mentioned already. So we've got these on here. These are the successes that Richard picks out, so I'll leave those for now. I'll move on to the next slide, but those really are 5 things that we're really proud of in terms of where we've been working on those for the last 3 years and improving them, but also how we've accelerated those in the last 8 months to be things that we're really proud of as a business that we want to export and also talk about in much more depth with people. So I suppose looking at these here, and when I presented 2 years ago at the Strand to a group of people. This is a slide I used back then about why we had achieved silver and why we were successful then. I think that still holds true. So these 6 bullet points, and I was a seventh one at the bottom, I think are still of value for you, and still things that I think any business, if you follow these steps, there's no doubt that you'll achieve what you want to achieve. And whether that's accreditation, silver, gold, or platinum, I think these are just really, really key. So a clear action plan is absolutely key. Knowing where you're going, where you want to, what you want to achieve, and having the buy-in for that. And really on point two, management buy-in from the off. And when Richard came in, and we're bringing in an additional practitioner, Valerie, to work with us next year to work alongside Richard. And when Richard and I were briefing Valerie about the business itself, Richard was talking about how one of the things that he really appreciates about Pearson is the fact that the senior management team are present and engaged. So when Richard meets with them on an annual basis for our catch-ups, they all turn up and they're there for an hour and a half, and they've prepared, and they're honest, and they talk about what we're doing really well and where our challenges are. For me, that means there's no surprises when Richard goes around. So when he speaks to our employees, there's a joined up message there. So if you can, management buy-in is absolutely key. If you're struggling with that, think, and this may come up in the Q&A, who are your allies? Who are the people you know really believe in this, and how can you use them to be your best support in those senior team meetings? That's key. Then it's about building a community. Build enough people with you so that your voice is heard 10 times louder. And certainly when I go to meetings with the board and with the senior managers, I'm there talking on behalf of 80 people, 300 people, 1,000 people, not me. It's not my view, it's their view. So the evidence I need behind me is things like surveys and focus groups, but it's about, pulling it together and having those people there that you can call upon for views on how we're doing. So when when COVID first kicked off and when we were in that process, and I've got a slide later on to show that, went out to that group and said, how are we doing? What can we do more of? And having 100 people come back to you in a day to tell you what we're doing well and what we could do more of meant we could be really, really agile in terms of how we adapted. And that was so important in terms of how Pearson sort of rode that wave of instability, I suppose, over the last 8 months. Benchmarking and information gathering. So when we got together as a group of champions back in October, I asked Joanna Abayi, who some of you would have seen, and she's doing an event next week for Investors in People. She came and talked to us about not just about diversity and inclusion, but also just about being a good business and how to be successful. So we bring in people from outside. So we brought in Joanna, and we also asked Stuart Comer from Sainsbury's to talk to us, because I've been to an event with Sainsbury's before, and they're an inspiring company to hear from. They're a big company, much bigger than us, and a really varied company. And they're gold, and they've maintained gold all this time because of the work they put in to be a good place to work and a great place to work. So I wanted my employees to hear about that, because I thought that was really key. And some of the feedback I got, because obviously Sainsbury's have announced recently some job cuts in their area, and one of the champions said to me, it was so good hearing from someone at Sainsbury's about why these changes may happen, what challenges they're facing, because I understood then when the news came out on the BBC why that might have happened, and that really helped me understand. So if you can, these events today are brilliant, but how can you involve your employees in those? And so I think it's about spreading the word about attending events and bringing speakers in if you can. Don't stop communicating is absolutely key. I know people can feel like they're over communicated with, but there's nothing worse than surprising people and making people think Investors in People is a once every 3 years event. So keep talking about what you're doing well, and keep talking to people about, sometimes about the process, but the people involved in it, and use those networks to do that for you. I've talked about buy-in for management team, but also keeping them informed. So I have a regular slot every quarter, not only as part of the employee engagement group, but also at their regular sort of weekly meeting. So I will pop in there and give them a 10-minute, quarter of an hour update on how we're doing. It doesn't need to be war and peace. It's really just about making sure they know where we are and how we're doing. And the final one there is really, really key. And it's not about bringing somebody so close that you could fool them into thinking that we're doing a great job, but we're not. It's about really bringing them in as close as you can, so they understand how your business works, so that when they do hear good stories, they can challenge those and make sure that they're honest. And when they hear negative stories, they can challenge and fall back on the evidence that you provided them beforehand. So it's really important, I think, to work with your practitioner. And I definitely think that the work we've done with Richard over the last 3 years has helped us become a much more honest, open, and forward-thinking business. Opportunities as a business. So again, I popped these up earlier, so there's nothing new I want to say on these 5 areas here really, but these are the slides that I think the areas that I think we'll build on top of that. So the image there is our Strand building, which again, some of you came to that a couple of years ago. Lovely building on the Strand, Art Deco, sort of state-of-the-art building, being totally refurbished. And like many of you, we're now thinking about our office space. We were going to refurbish that and have that as our head office and have a number of floors and, you know, thousands of people potentially working there in a much more agile way and definitely in a more hybrid way, but nothing like we're now looking at. So today we're looking at a much more reduced office space and much less time spent in the office. So going into the office, as John Amici, the psychologist and public speaker would say, use it for important and sort of intelligent collaboration. So inductions, when we meet with people, to have those intelligent conversations, not to go in and sit at a desk for 9 to 5 doing what you can do from home. So it's really important that we make the office of the future like that. So that's a challenge we face, but it's an opportunity, definitely. I think the changes to our business haven't changed in terms of digital disruption and what consumers want. Absolutely, are still a big challenge for us as a business, and we're still adapting to that and adapting our people to it. People who've produced textbooks for 20 years that are hard copy need to move with the times in terms of what skills that they need and how do we help them to become great digital publishers, because they've got the knowledge and they really are experts in their subject. How do we help them become the best they can be in this new digital world where consumers want something now and they want to rent it, not buy it? Changing workforce and skill sets. So yeah, each new generation of people coming to the workforce see the world differently, and certainly we're finding that with the last sort of 8 months, what our workforce needs and demands of us is different to what they wanted this time last year. And how do we adapt to that? And I think we've done a good job of doing that, but we need to keep listening and asking questions. There's still plenty of political, financial disruption going on. As an education business and a learning business, the world has been turned upside down, and what happens next year around examinations and assessment of students' work is still something we're living with, and we're ready to move when the Department for Education will decide what the way forward is. But that's something that we have to deal with on a day-to-day business basis, but also Brexit, which isn't far down the road as well, and how we are going to adapt to that and how is that going to affect our business. There's no doubt that COVID-19 and the impact for next year is something that is an opportunity for us in terms of a lot of parts of our business, where we move into a business that's about digital and virtual learning, but obviously it does affect some of the more legacy parts of our business, and how do we deal with that and our employees? The Black Lives Matter conversation and issues that we faced, and disparity and opportunity in the workplace, are things that continue not just into 2021, but continue until that's solved. That's something that we know we've admitted we have had an issue with that in our global business before and in the UK as well, and we're taking steps to address that. And that's about bringing people in and showing that we're doing things. A lot of CEOs and a lot of companies put a lot of messages on LinkedIn to say they stood shoulder to shoulder with the Black Lives Matter movement. I think we're doing much more than that, and I think we're doing that publicly and certainly internally, showing how we're changing our textbooks, how we're changing our assessment matters, how we're changing the way we recruit and develop talent, to show that we are serious about this. And I think to be viewed as a gold business next year, we have to be seen to be doing that and continue to do that well beyond our assessment and into well into the future. And the other opportunity we've got is a new CEO, somebody who isn't steeped in education, somebody who has worked at Disney and Time Warner and companies like that before. So what does that bring to the party, and what does that change in terms of our mission, our values, our behaviors, but also what we do as a business? So those are real challenges that we face, but I think all of those things, there are great opportunities for a business like ours. On the COVID response, and I'm going to pull into close to an end now so we can turn into the Q&A, but in terms of what's on here, I want to pick out a couple of things that we've done that I think are worth pulling out. So again, things that we were doing before COVID, but have been magnified. So I've talked about the well-being and about Pilates and mindfulness. It really does help to have that offering for your employees. No doubt about that. I think we've really benefited from having that. And I've got a slide after this which shows how we've then shared that with our employees. We've done something around reverse mentoring, and that was kicked off in January. So before everything around COVID kicked off, that's bringing our leadership team into contact with more employees on the shop floor, and that's again been an absolute bonus and benefit to us as a business. So many more conversations now happening between the lines and not following the chain of command, and that's given our leadership team a much better idea about what employees are seeing as opportunities and challenges, but also what we're doing really well, and that's been fantastic. And I've had two mentors for me, and that's helped in terms of the way I communicate and what I'm looking at in terms of what we do as a business. No one in Pearson's been furloughed. That's been something, again, that I think we've been really proud of, that we've been able to move our resources around the business. Resources, I don't just mean people, I mean everything that we do, but our people have been very fluid and very good in recognizing that we need to do this as a business, but they really appreciate as a company what we've done. And we recently announced last week that every employee will have time off over Christmas that's given to them by the company. Historically, that is something you have to take off yourself. We're saying, no, you have that. We recognise as a business, we've been working 100% for the last 8 months, and a lot of people with very little break, and maybe not enough break. And so as a company, we need to take a breath and recognise that. So that's something, again, that is really, really key. And I think, other than that, I'm trying to think anything else on here. I suppose, and the little touches. Some of you on the call here may be smaller companies than us and could do things like send a hamper to all your employees to say thank you and well done. When you've got 2,000 employees or 22,000 globally, that stacks up to a lot of money. And even though we may have a really good balance sheet, it's a lot of money to put aside there. So we've tried to go down the route of personal touch and small things and recognition, a lot of recognition. So there's a lot of award ceremonies coming up at the end of the year, a lot of thank yous taking place within webinars. And we did things like every employee got a Pearson branded face mask, which doesn't sound like much, but when we were trying to encourage employees to come into the workplace if they could for their own mental health and for their own productivity, we wanted to make sure that we gave them the best we could for that. So there are things within here that I think we've done really, really well. And here's an example of something that I put together. It's a bit messy, so bear with me, but on a fortnightly webinar that we have with my line manager, Sharon Haig, who's the Senior Vice President for our schools business. So around about 800 people she reporting to her. This is something I have. This is a slide I have every single fortnight on here, and it gives people access to the latest events that are taking place in the business, but also access to the support they need. So we're never hiding the fact that you can go to our employee assistance program or to our mental health first aiders, but also picking out learning opportunities or opportunities to get involved with our employee resource group. So last week was Global Inclusion Week here at Pearson. So what events are taking place and how do we get involved there? So this, for me, is a really key way of pulling together what we're doing and making sure that people have access to the things they need. Measurement, second last slide now, I promise, then we'll pull away and I'll see all your faces. Measurement, really key. So in Sharon's meeting, so 800 people in that group. Our biggest week so far we had was just over 500 people, which was the maximum we could have for Zoom. We average out around about 300 people, which, given with summer holidays in the middle of that as well, I think is a great number of people. So at the start of that session, we ask 2 questions. One is, how would you feel about what concerns have you got this week? And then, how are you feeling? And you can see on these lines that when we started measuring this right at the start of March, something like I don't have any concern this week was quite low, talking about 15%, whereas we get a peak in September to being over 40%. So we could measure there that people were generally feeling okay, but you could see spikes of childcare being an issue early on when obviously schools were shut. But as soon as schools opened and the summer holidays were there and the schools opened, you can see that isn't as much a problem for us. But whereas when the government announced lockdown 2 in September there, you've got a huge spike in terms of general anxiety. And so that meant that we could nuance our messaging. So Sharon and also the other leadership teams could look about when we have our communication with people, we're going to put more information in there about childcare or about mental health first aiders or about the bigger picture to sort of reassure people that we're okay here. This is what we're doing. And that was really important for us to have the data collected to then inform what we do next. And this is so important to the work that I'm doing. And it's great. We do have global pulse surveys, which tell us the bigger picture. This gives me a real, I suppose a real close view about what's happening in my part of the business. And then we've continued to do things. This week, we did our first virtual work experience day. So the bottom middle there, which is people, that's a class of absolute ragamuffins in Hertfordshire who are a nightmare in terms of noise and stuff. But when you got them one-to-one doing world of work conversations and interviews, they were great. So again, continue to involve employees in things that aren't work, because we know we've got a mission to do things like this and be involved with charities and with schools and learners. And my final slide is something that I've been doing. So start this month, I stopped doing this weekly, but I've been gardening all summer. And one thing I've done is kept a regular blog, which again amplifies the messages I've just told you pretty much in the last half an hour, but also gives me something to focus on, because I've got mental health and I want to look after myself. It's something physical. It's something, there's a routine base to it. I can communicate with people across the business on a weekly basis. And yeah, it's become a real soft and safe place for people to come and talk about things. And we've created networks across Ohio, Canada, Australia, as well as the UK. That means that people who never spoke before are speaking now. And so I would encourage you, if you're doing this at work, and I'm sure you are, with quizzes and with different groups of people coming together, that find what you enjoy, find what you're passionate about, because other people care too. And it's a lovely way of joining up groups of people.